So I'm gonna get started. And Shari, thank you so much again. It's up to you now.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here. I'm going to share my screen so everybody can see it here. And I hope that you will all participate with me today. I've got some, let's see, let me get this removed. There we go. I've got some questions and some feedback I'm going to be looking for. So hopefully you can engage with me a little bit, and I will talk fast because there is a lot to cover in an hour. All right. What I'm going to be talking about today is the power of our stories in this work, and then the stories of our clients. Brene Brown said one of the most powerful things I've ever heard her say: loving ourselves throughout the process of owning our own story is the bravest thing we will ever do. And I read this and I do think about our clients and how brave and courageous they are to share a piece of themselves with us. She also said, you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside of your story and you hustle for your worthiness. This one also makes me think of the clients that we work with who are constantly hustling for their worthiness. How they choose to show us that can be cruel, it can be aggressive, it can be dysfunctional, but they're all hustling for their own worthiness. I want to start by telling you a case study. Telling you a little bit about a case study. This is the story of Jan, and I'm going to give you a part of her story, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the brain and then come back to the story later in the hour. Jan was 19 years old when she got married and moved to Colorado. And she married a very aggressive, very possessive, domineering man. And he would not allow her to have a phone or a job or a car or friends. What she could do was stay in their trailer throughout the day and make sure everything was clean and have dinner ready by 6. Now, those are the things that she could do. And so, as you can imagine, she got very lonely, and there were some dark moments for her. And she started experiencing these visuals that she couldn't explain, little images and snippets of things that she didn't quite understand. They made her very scared. And the only way that she knew how to sort of keep them at bay was to clean something. So she would clean a closet and then clean it again and then clean it again. And then she was okay and able to breathe again. Fast forward a few years, and she and her husband had 2 little girls. And again, with the visuals, the images, the scary dreams, she didn't quite understand them. She got so scared about her girls' safety that she stood over them at night in their bedrooms and just sort of watched over them to make sure they were safe. Jan started gaining weight for no apparent reason. She went into Weight Watchers. She went on diets. She did cleanses. She did a water and lettuce only diet for a month, and still kept putting on weight. So she finally went to a doctor who referred her to some specialists. And the specialist ran a battery of tests and brought her in and said, we can't find anything physically wrong with you. Have you experienced any trauma? Jan said, not that I remember. I mean, I didn't always have my father in my life. He died when I was young, but no, not really that I can remember, not any different than anyone else. Well, they didn't buy it. So they suggested that she get into therapy. She was a nice Southern gal. So she took the discharge paperwork and she thanked them and she threw it away on the way out the door. She didn't need therapy. Until the day that her 8-year-old daughter walked into the kitchen. She was busy fixing breakfast and she had pots and pans, and she turned around and she saw her daughter in the entryway and she froze. She dropped the pans, food went everywhere. No words came. She was literally shut down. And it was at that moment that she realized, okay, I need to get into some therapy and figure out what's going on here. And she did. And within 3 months, the weight came off. I will tell you a little bit about what came of that and what she started remembering in therapy in just a minute. But first, there's some things we need to understand about the brain first. For purposes of today, we're going to get very simple with the brain. I'm going to break it into 2 different sections. We've got the frontal lobe up here. Okay, we all know the frontal lobe is responsible for our executive functioning. So our logical reasoning, where we do pros and cons, where we make a plan, that all exists in our frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe has a filtering system. Now, let me just say, the frontal lobe is not fully developed in women until we're about the age of 25, 26. In men, I'm not sure if it ever develops. No, I'm just kidding. No, in all people, it is developed around the age of 26, 27. And it has a filtering system. And so data and experiences and what we know to be true sort of filters through this system. And then we can spit out our decision on things or our answer. So it kind of works like this. If you were to go into the break room at work and see a beautiful chocolate glazed donut, you might say something like, oh man, that looks good. I really want that donut. I have worked hard lately. I've busted my butt at work, but I was going to go out tonight and have pie with my friends. That'll put 10 pounds on my hips. Okay, wait a minute. That's stupid. That's not how that works. Okay, 400 calories. You know what? I'm going to have the donut. I'm going to have the pie tonight and treat myself, and I'll go back on my diet tomorrow. Boom. That's how it works in the frontal lobe. Now, when you go further back, you find where our language and our thoughts lie. On both sides of the ears, you've got 2 mechanisms that are fascinating to me. You've got the amygdala, which holds our emotions, and the hippocampus, which puts a timeline to those emotions. Okay, so you go to the county fair and you see kids on a roller coaster and you can hear them screaming. And you might think, oh my goodness, I remember when I was 12 and went on a roller coaster. That was so much fun. That's the amygdala and the hippocampus working in tandem with each other. I have a friend who grew up in a dangerous part of Chicago, and his mother worked the night shift as a nurse. And every night when she went to work, when he was a little boy, she would say, when it gets dark, I want you to hit the ground. Right? So that's what he would do. He would hit the ground when it got dark and kind of slither around on the floor so that he wouldn't be hit by any bullets flying, because there was a lot of gang shooting in the neighborhood. He grew up, he had 4 kids, he took them to Disneyland. They got a hotel across the street. What happens at 10:30 at Disneyland? The fireworks start, right? He's in his hotel with the kids. He hears the banging of the fireworks, and he's frantic, trying to shove them under the beds. That's a hippocampus and an amygdala that are out of sync. And that's trauma work. That's a lot of the work that you're doing with the clients that you work with, is matching up that amygdala and the hippocampus so that the timeline fits. And people know that they might have been under attack in the past, but they're not necessarily under attack in the present. Okay, you go all the way back, you've got the survival brain, otherwise known as the lizard brain, the survival brain, the limbic system. The limbic system is fully developed when we're born, unlike the frontal lobe. It's fully developed. And the limbic system cares about one thing and one thing only, and that is our survival. That's it. That's all it cares about. The limbic system tends to believe everything that it's told when we're young. Okay, so if you or your clients are shown as a child that a relationship looks like mom and dad fighting, and there's alcohol, and somebody gets hit and leaves for 3 days, The limbic system says, oh, got it. Okay, that's what a relationship looks like. If you are told that you are unworthy, lazy, fat, unathletic, not worth my time, unworthy, any of that, the limbic system says, duly noted. Okay. And we know that those messages become beliefs that chatter in the background of our lives until, as adults, we sort of rework them. One thing I want to say about the limbic system, this is where your clients are probably living the majority of the time. Because the majority of the time, our clients are worried about their survival. We're going to talk about the reactions that live in this part of the brain here in just a second. But first, let's talk about neural pathways. So we know these exist in the brain. Neural pathways can be small crevices or thick, deep canyons. And these guys, neurotransmitters, flow down our neural pathways and inform us how we're going to act and the decisions that we're going to make in life, right? So if I grew up believing that I was not valuable or lovable, the neurotransmitters are going to flow down to my body and I'm going to make decisions like this. I'm going to gravitate towards people who also don't find me lovable or valuable. I'm going to find people who validate that belief. All right, because as humans, that's what we do. If we believe something, even if it's unconscious, subconscious level, we're going to act in a way that validates our beliefs, period. That's just how we are as humans. It's how we're hardwired. That's why your clients are often continuing self-sabotaging behaviors. Even though you remind them every single day for years that they're worthy, okay? I like to explain neural pathways like this. If you were to walk up the side of a mountain and see a stream flowing down the side of the mountain, when it rains, when the snow melts, that's exactly where the water is going to rush down because it's ingrained and it's deep, right? You would have to go up every day over and over again and dig out a new trench and make it deeper and deeper every single day if you wanted the water to flow down that one instead. And so that's what it looks like with our clients, right? They have these deep ingrained beliefs, okay? And they're deep, as you can see. And then we come along and we introduce this new belief, this new way of thinking. And after months or years, we think, why are they not getting it? The reason is because they're jumping back to the deeply ingrained neural pathway. And while it took them 24 years to get to the point where they are just constantly sabotaging themselves and showing up in the courtroom or showing up in your office because they've committed another crime, it might take years for them to start to believe something differently about themselves, to learn that there's a different way of behaving. And that can be frustrating for us as providers, can't it? I mean, I don't know how many times I walk into a facility and the staff will tell me, this kid has been here for 9 months. We love on him. We tell him how worthy he is, and he is still running away. We don't get it. Well, we get it, don't we? We get why it takes so long. All right, let's go back to that limbic brain for a minute. Because the limbic brain only cares about our survival, there are 6 survival reactions that live in this part of the brain. Fight, flight, freeze, faint, fornicate, and feed. Okay. We typically, as a society, talk about the first 3, but I want to break them all down. So fight. The person in your life who hurls insults, gets aggressive, their tone is escalated, they're angry. That's a person in fight mode. Flight, the person that just says, I can't take this, and they walk out of the room or they walk out of the relationship. Okay, that's flight. Freeze, the person that literally just shuts down. That's what happened to Jan in the kitchen that day, that she just froze, almost went catatonic, no words, no body movements, nothing. Faint can look like fainting. Okay, we see this sometimes with soldiers in combat, but it can also look like the need for sleep. All right, so let me explain that for a minute. I was running a wing of the psych hospital in Fort Collins several years ago, and we had a very aggressive kid there. He would throw couches, he put his head through a glass window. He was very, very aggressive. I had the nerve to ask him to make his bed one morning, and he came up and started choking me. And I thought, okay, this is how I'm going to go out in a residential facility. But what I said was, enough. And he dropped his hands and he went to his room and he fell asleep for 10 hours. In fact, he needed to sleep every time he was aggressive. And sometimes it was for a couple hours and sometimes it was for 10 to 16 hours. But the need for sleep when you are under stress or tension is a survival mechanism. As Claudia said, I run a small private practice and I work with trauma survivors. And oftentimes when we're talking about their trauma, I see them start to yawn on the screen. Or they say, oh, so tired. I feel like I need a nap after this session. That's a version of faint, okay? Let's go on. Fornicate. Fornicate is more than just porn addiction. It can look like excessive flirting. It can look like high risk sexual situations, lots of sexual partners. That can all fall under fornicate. It can also look like the need for sexual intimacy when there's been stress and tension. Okay, sometimes I see this in males or females when, you know, there's been an argument and one of the partners will say, you know, I just feel like I need to be close to my partner after this fight and I want to, you know, cuddle with him. And the other partner's like, get away from me. I'm not ready for that yet. So that can fall under that category. Then we've got feed. Tell me what feed might look like in the chat. Just throw out some suggestions here. What could a feeding behavior look like? Anybody have any ideas on this one? Ooh, smoking. Yes, absolutely. Stress eating. Yes, great. Drinking, 100%. It could look substance use. Yes, it could look like eating too much. It could look like restricting food. You know, a shoe addiction where you're constantly buying shoes. Binge eating. Yes. You know, workaholics. I don't know how many of you that work, you know, 14, 16-hour days. I'm always amazed when I go to the gym and yeah, shopping is a great one. When I go to the gym and I hear the guys over in the corner dropping the barbells and they're grunting and yelling and you can tell that they've been there for hours. All of that is a feeding behavior. And all of it is the limbic system's way of saying, danger, I don't feel safe here. And the only way I know how to survive this moment is to do one of these things. Think about what yours is. Think about way at the beginning of 2020 when the world was shut down and everybody was like, oh my goodness, what is happening? You know, which one did you go to? I know you probably could have eaten off my floors. They were so clean. I was just cleaning everything. I was in straight up feed mode. All right. Let's keep going here. Oops. Everything's frozen. Give me a second. I'm going to stop the share and I'll share again. Get back on track here. Any questions so far? Any comments so far?
This is great. Doing a great job. Loving it.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. All right. Well, we might have to do it in a different mode, folks. Let's try to get it in a different mode and see if that works. Gotta love technology issues during a presentation. All right.
Feel free to send me the, the PDF or slideshow. I can run it from my side.
Okay. All right. Well, I
So,
think I'm going to show it from this angle, if that's okay. Let me get back to all of you. So give me just a minute. Claudia, can you still hear me?
yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
good. All right. Okay, let's try this. Thanks for hanging in here with me, folks. Okay, can you all see this?
Yes, it's not in slideshow mode, but we can see it. Yes.
Okay, good. We'll keep it in this mode for now, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that I wanna talk about, and this is an important one, and maybe some of you have heard it. When we're dealing with clients, we have to remember that this work is about connection before correction, okay? By the very nature of the title that you hold, you are sending clients into their limbic systems. They are scared. You are in control of their future. You are telling them how they need to behave, which is different than how they've always done it. That is going to cause stress and tension. And so they're going to go right back to their limbic brains. And they're probably going to act out. We'll talk about that in a minute. That fight, flight, freeze, faint, feed, fornicate, all of those. In those moments, it is important to connect with two people. First, yourself. That might look like taking a deep breath when a client is hurling insults at you. All right. It might look like stepping away for a minute. It might look like tapping out of a conversation with one of your own children at home, right? And connecting with and grounding yourself first. Then connecting with them, providing safety, because safety is the only way that we get from here back here again. That's it. Safety is the only way we can click our brains back online again. Then correct. And frankly, we live in a society that does that in reverse a lot of times. We correct when we're escalated, when we're in our limbic brains. They're still upset. They're in their limbic brains. And so we've got two people in their lizard brains going at it. And nothing ever works when that happens. Am I right? Yeah. Connection before correction. All right, let's go to the next slide here. Questions about that? Okay. When we stress, we regress. Okay, we regress back to our limbic brains and we become half of our chronological age. And what I mean by that is our behavior becomes our language. All right, let me say that again. When we're in our limbic brains, our behavior becomes our language. And what do we do in this society with behaviors? We often punish them, right? We punish behaviors when sometimes that is the only language that a person has, is to act out what they're feeling. They can't access their thoughts and their language. They're too stuck back here. All right. We see this with clients all the time, don't we? When I do these trainings, I talk about how the strongest nervous system wins. The strongest, okay? That could be the angriest. It could be the happiest, the calmest. It could be somebody that walks into a room like this. They don't say a word, but you can tell they're angry. You can tell they're closed off. And have you ever seen anybody that walks into a room and can take over the entire room? And before long, everybody's anxious, right? That's what I mean by the strongest nervous system wins. If you're going to do this work well, it's up to us to learn how to be the strongest nervous system in a very calm, very regulated way. The reason for that is because one limbic system will play off of another. All right, let me give you another example of this. How many of you saw this video with Gayle King and R. Kelly? R. Kelly, a few years ago, is accused of, sexually abusing many women. And this is before he was actually sentenced and sent to jail. Anybody see this interview? It's fascinating to watch. You can look it up on YouTube. It looks like R. Kelly is the strongest nervous system because this man goes off the chain. He is yelling, screaming, spitting. He's just out of control. But if you watch closely, Gayle King sits there just like this the entire time. And she lowers her tone and she says, Mr. Kelly, we all want to hear from you. We want to hear your side of things. Robert, it's okay. It's okay. And she just keeps doing this in a very regulated way. And you watch him start to come down and match her. And he's able to sit down and have the interview. She was the strongest nervous system. I want to tell you a story about this next slide. I can barely even look at it. I cannot even tell you how much I hate these creatures, okay? Please don't judge me, but I can't stand them. So much so that at any given time in my garage, there are at least 8 boxes of Decon strategically placed in my garage, okay? And I check them every night. And when I see one getting low, I put a new one out. So several years ago, there was a cold snap in Colorado, and I had a crack in my garage floor. And so when I shut the garage door, there was a hole where mice could come and go freely throughout the evening. I didn't realize this, but I went into the garage the next morning to go in my car and get my computer. This was early in the morning. I opened the garage door. There are dead mice everywhere. They had eaten the Decon all night long. And I was hysterical, okay? I'm in my SpongeBob jammies early in the morning. I run in, I start yelling, I'm screaming, the dog starts barking, my kid wakes up, he's scared. I grab my phone, I run out the front door. I call my mom who lives down the street, and I only had to say one word, mice. She's like, I got you, I'll be right there. So I am on the curb. Okay, I'm sort of rocking back and forth. I might have been sucking my thumb. I don't remember. It was all a haze. Anyway, she drives up. She gets out of the car and she says, stay right there. I'm going to clean this up. She launches into action, sweeping up these mice, sanitizing everything. 45 minutes later, I'm still sort of rocking myself on the curb. She comes over and just puts her arm around me. Just kind of rocking with me. I start to match her breathing. And after a while, she says, okay, are you ready now to make a plan? I was like, yes, I can do it now. Had she done that when she first pulled up, there's no way I could have gone there. Not even if I wanted to. I was in straight up fight, flight, freeze mode. The blood was not rushing to my brain, my frontal lobe, where I could think. The blood was rushing to my extremities so that I could fight, flight, freeze, faint, fornicate, or feed, one of those, just like your clients. Who in our society cannot access their language and their thoughts? Who? Besides politicians sometimes, who else? I'm just kidding. Babies. Babies cannot access their thoughts and their language. And how are we with babies? We have a cadence to our voice. We lower our tone. Okay, we bring our bodies inward. We are reassuring. Shh, I got you. We'll figure this out. We'll figure out what you need, right? We're reassuring. We drill down. We try to find the problem. And I often wonder why we lose that with people as they get older. We can tell when someone's in fight, flight, freeze, faint, fornicate, or feed mode. We know they need safety. That's what I mean by being the strongest nervous system. Okay, so that you're not getting escalated with them, but you're able to give them safety so that they can come back here and their brains kick online again. All right, I'm going to go back to the case study for a second. Back to the story of Jan. So where I left this, and this, what I'm about to tell you might be a little bit triggering. So if you need to go off camera or turn me off or whatever, feel free to do that. These are probably stories that you've heard from your clients. Jan goes into therapy and she starts putting together the puzzle pieces of her life to make sense of all the little images that she was seeing throughout her adulthood. And what she remembered was this. She was born to a wealthy family, a mother and father, and her father adored her. The problem was he died when she was 3 of a brain aneurysm. And so she was left in the care, her and her brother were left in the care of her mother. And her mother started drinking heavily and binge drinking and leaving the kids for days on end. Jan was little, her brother was little. There was often not any food in the home. And so they would go to the neighbors' houses and beg for food. And finally, the police stepped in and came to her and said, look, we're getting complaints from the neighbors that you're not home. You need to be with the kids more. The family got concerned and took Jan's brother. For whatever reason, they left her in the care of her mother. And her mother's remedy for this was to start bringing her on the drinking episodes. And so Jan would have to sit down on the floorboard of the car for hours with no food and no potty break while her mother went into bars and drank. Or she was brought into the bars and made to sit crouch under the table for hours. As you can imagine, things escalated and there was abuse in this home that would probably make headlines. Jan was caged, she was burned, she was physically abused, she was sexually abused while her mother held her down. It was atrocious. And finally, the state stepped in and took Jan. And she had to go to the hospital for 2 weeks because she was so malnourished and she had broken bones that hadn't healed properly. When she was released, she thought she was going to get to go home, but they took her to an orphanage, and it looked a lot like this picture. When she arrived at the orphanage, they brought in all of her boxes of belongings, and all the kids got to rifle through and pick what they wanted. They got to pick the toys and the clothes they wanted, and that's where Jan just sort of went dark. She hit the floor for hours and cried. She had lost her father, her mother, her brother, and now her home and all of her belongings. So she literally had nothing. In this facility, there were 200 kids and 199 plates, spoons, forks. And the idea was to teach the child who didn't get one how to stand up for themselves. Well, usually that was Jan, and Jan didn't have a voice to stand up for herself, so she often went without eating. She was a bedwetter, and because of that, she was abused in the orphanage and made to wash her sheets out in the sink and put them up so everybody could make fun of her all day. Every Sunday was visitation day, and Jan left she didn't go to the bathroom all day. I mean, she curled up on the top of the gate. She wouldn't eat. She didn't want to miss a visitor, her mother, anybody who would come to see her. Nobody ever did, not for 10 years. That's how long she was in this place. Every night, the kids had to move from bed to bed to bed, like a different bed each night, so they wouldn't get attached to anything. And the only thing that kept Jan alive all these years in the orphanage was a trunk filled with jewels. There were rings, there were bracelets, there were necklaces, and she was the only one with a key. And when everyone went to sleep at night, she would unlock the chest. She would carry it from bed to bed each night, She would unlock the chest and she would take out the jewels and she'd hold them up in the moonlight and she'd decide which rings her aunts were going to get when they came to visit and which necklace she would give her mother. And she spent hours doing this every night. Let me ask you this. What do you think as an adult her diagnosis would be? Any suggestion, any ideas? I mean, you've probably seen some of this in your clients. Absolutely PTSD, complex PTSD for sure. Maybe some OCD, maybe some anxiety, maybe some depression. What do you think the prognosis was for her? I mean, I know I have had these files come across my desk over the years, and I've thought, the prognosis is not good for this client. Let me ask you this. Do you think the trunk was real? No? Got a couple no's? Let's ask her. Jan, can you come here for a minute?
Hi.
Was the trunk real?
Yes.
No, it was not real.
Okay, no, it wasn't. But you know what? I was 40 years old before I came to terms with the fact that it wasn't. I never questioned it. When I left the orphanage, I didn't have it. I never questioned where it was because so much came and went in my life that I just never had reason to question that it was real or where it went. My therapist that I actually spent many years with, she would often ask me, well, tell me about this trunk you had. And I would describe it in detail over and over to her. She was so invested in my trunk and I didn't understand why. And then one day, deep into our therapeutic relationship, she said, Jan, if you lost everything in that orphanage, where did you get all of these jewels and how were you able to keep them? And I said, oh, well, I couldn't answer. I didn't know. I had no words. And that was the moment I realized there's no way that trunk was real. But that trunk signified so much to me. It was my worth. It was my value. It was the light, the shiny, the bright in a world of darkness. And if that trunk was not real, I was going to have to start over. I was going to have to face the darkness of my past, of my childhood, and I was going to have to find my worth, and I had no idea where to find it. And I was lost, and I was broken, and it affected me deeply. She remembers how deeply affected I was, because for those of you who might not know, she's my daughter. And so when I would come home and she would see the lost look on my face, she knew something terrible had happened.
Yeah, that was a dark time when you realized that trunk wasn't real. Can you talk a little bit, give a couple examples of what it was that your therapist did to really provide you safety, but to help you on your journey?
Absolutely. When I went to her for a long time, week after week, I would go in, I would sit down, I would talk about anything other than what I was actually there to talk about, because I did not have words to put to what had happened to me and what I felt about those things. And she would, week after week, at the end of the session of me not saying anything, I just knew she was going to say, Jan, I really can't help you here. I need to pass you on to someone else. This is not working. But she never did. I would stand up, she would give me a hug, and she would say, see you next week. That was the safety that I needed to eventually find the words. Now, I was a little toddler in finding my words. I would speak in the third person. I would, I would say, well, she felt this. She asked me one day, she said, let's put a scene up on the wall. I want you to describe that scene to me. Tell me the players and tell me what's going on. I started out in the third person, but eventually I was able to say that happened to me. I felt this. And it was just a gentle progression into, I had never had a safe world before, and she provided me one. And that just continued to build. She wanted me to embrace little Jan, the little part of me, and I wanted nothing to do with that. She would have me envision her at the door and invite her in. Everything bad that happened to me was because of that child. I wanted nothing to do with her. And I would slam the door visually in my mind. I would slam the door and say, nope, I don't want it. She's ugly. I hate her. She's not lovable. Let's talk about me. But I kept having to do these things over and over. And one day I did invite her in. I closed my eyes. I pictured little Jan. I invited her in, and I scooped down, and I held her, and I cried, and I said, I have abused you where everyone else left off. I will not deny you anymore. I will not negate your feelings. I will let you express how you feel and what your thoughts are. And I love you. Now, I opened my eyes, and of course I was holding myself, but that was the beginning of a beautiful relationship with the most innocent part of me, the beautiful part of me, the most courageous part of me. She gave me strength when I didn't think I had any. And I eventually found my voice. And I love her. I love little Jan. And I don't deny her now. She loves ice cream.
Oh my goodness. So the other day, mom calls me and says, hey, you want to go to dinner? And I was like, yeah, sure. She said, little Jan wants ice cream before dinner. I was like, okay, mom, with the little Jan stuff.
And nobody sees anything wrong with that, right? But I needed to do that. That was because I guess in some way I was also embracing what happened to me. And I acknowledge that now. I'm not ashamed of it. And my therapy was, as I've already said, was long, and it was uphill, and I've had ups and downs along the way, but I've learned, what does that say? Eat dessert before.
I love that.
That's great. But I've learned how to, like Sherry was talking about earlier, I give myself different messages than I used to give myself. I used to validate my unworthiness and my hate for myself. And I don't do that anymore.
We wrote a book together called Which Way? And so we travel around and speak on this book. If there are any questions you want to ask now, please do. We're open to those. And we'll stay on for a little bit afterwards too. Tell them real quick. I want to go over a couple more things, but you didn't stay married to my dad.
I did not. It took me 32 years to find the courage to leave him. But I did. And it was difficult. You know, even though it was the best thing for me, it was still a hard thing for me to do. And there was a lot of struggle with that, but I would have never, become as whole as I am if I had stayed under his domination and his oppression. I needed to be free, to find myself. Yeah.
Any questions before we just go over a couple more things?
Y'all can ask anything that you'd like to ask. I'm an open book. I wrote one, and I it's all in there. So there's no question that's taboo. I'm happy to
Yeah, thank you
on
for sharing your
anything.
story. Very powerful story. So thank you. Very
Thank you.
moving too.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, like I said, we'll hang on for a little bit afterwards if anybody does have any questions. But I want to talk real quick before we end today about the difference between trauma-informed work and trauma-ingrained work. All right. We all heard about trauma-informed in the 80s, and we loved it, right? Because it was all about the clients and how to make sure that our clients feel safe. That's where we were introduced to weighted blankets and started piping soft, soothing music into our reception areas, and had fidgets for our clients so that they could, you know, use their hands when they were talking about something traumatic. All good stuff. Trauma ingrained work, though, is about you and how you show up as the strongest nervous system to the work that you do. It's about realizing your own traumas and how they may spill out sometimes with clients, how they're triggered sometimes. It's about realizing that our clients change through relationships, not words. It's not words that change people, it's relationships that change people. Trauma ingrained work is about understanding and appreciating resistance. All right, let me talk about that one for a second. I think my mother would have been seen as resistive in some therapeutic settings. I mean, she went to therapy forever and never even got to the real issue. She was talking about recipes the whole time. Think about your clients who put up roadblocks to doing the work that they need to do. I want to encourage each of you to look at resistance differently. When I used to run facilities and we had a real aggressive client, I would say something that used to just infuriate my staff, but I would ask them to tell me what is beautiful and insightful about that behavior. Okay. So I want you to think about your cruelest, most vile, aggressive, angry client. Maybe the client that doesn't shower. Maybe the client that never shows up. I don't know what it is. And tell yourself, what's insightful about that behavior? Okay. What is insightful about somebody who never showers? They may have found a way to keep people at a distance. What is insightful about the client who is aggressive and defensive and angry with you all the time? Maybe they have found a way to be heard. Okay, it's not that it has to be something we agree with, but they have found a way, the trunk, the imaginary trunk, right? We all find ways to cope with life, even if they're maladaptive ways. And so what if we celebrated those behaviors? What if we said to our clients, bravo. Bravo. I know that you drink too much. You also found a way to get through a life that's been really, really hard. The question now is it working for you? If it is, okay, I can't change your mind, right? If you're open to changing, let's talk about some other ways to get your needs met. I just wonder if we changed the conversation, how our work with clients would change. And then trauma ingrained work is about our own regulation, okay? Responding instead of reacting. We react from our limbic brain, we respond from our frontal lobe. And so how to keep our own selves in check. Claudia, can I go over 2 more slides before I end? Okay, I'm gonna talk super fast. I talk
Yeah,
fast.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Take your time.
Okay, so let's talk about the lizard playbook. Okay, when you're living back in your limbic brain, your lizard brain, the playbook looks like, well, first of all, let me ask you, have any of you ever owned a reptile in your life? A lizard of any? Oh, okay. So first of all, the question is why? No, I'm just kidding. No, for those of you that have know anything about reptiles, if you have a reptile in a cage and you put your hand in the cage, okay, the lizard is going to either fight with your finger and attack it, or flight and run away, or freeze, right? Or faint, or fornicate, try to have sex with your finger, or feed, try to eat your finger. I mean, the entire life of a lizard is fight, flight, freeze, faint, fornicate, and feed. So the lizard playbook looks like reactions that are automatic, okay? They're always based in fear. They're chaotic. Our reactions are chaotic usually, and they damage relationships. I mean, I think about the times when I lost it with my own child, and I was doing all of these. They were automatic, they were based in fear, they were chaotic, and I did damage. The life of a wizard, okay, the wizard playbook, the frontal lobe playbook looks like this. We are aware of our own regulation. We are connected, we tap out, all right? That's when we take a deep breath, when we leave the room for a minute, when we give ourselves a timeout for a few seconds, okay? We connect with our breath. We stay in our conscious mind, our frontal lobe, and then we can choose a tool that's deliberate. Okay, so that's the difference in the 2 playbooks. I hope that you will join me in a couple of weeks for part 2 of this, because we're going to go into how to do this, 1, and 2, we're going to go into some tools that you can actually use with your clients and use in your own personal life. So I'm hoping you'll join us again in a couple of weeks. Look, let me give you my contact information. There are a million ways you could have spent this hour. I know it's a lunch break and you're busy. I appreciate you for being here with me. Mom, is there anything you want to say?
There is. Let me take just 1 minute. I know that the audience today is in a diverse, your career paths are a little bit diverse, but the point is y'all are all here to understand trauma and to understand the workings of someone like me who has PTSD and often goes back to my limbic system. And I want you to know, y'all have got difficult jobs. Oh my gosh, they're difficult. Working with me had to have been difficult. My therapist has no idea that I still think of something she said to me or something a tool she gave me that I still use today. She has no idea that I've written a book. She doesn't know that this timid person who couldn't talk when she first arrived in her office, now speaks in front of hundreds of people at times. Y'all may never know what happens to the lives you touch, but I can guarantee you, you are making an impact with what you do. I wouldn't be here today. I attempted suicide twice. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for y'all and your sacrifices. And I want to thank you.
Thank you all. We will hang on for a little
Thank
bit if
you.
you have any questions.
Thank you so much. This was very, very, very powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so the next session is November 30th. I'm going to be sending the link again. And also I'll share your contact information, Shari, since you put it on the screen. So thank you again for attending.
You bet.
And
I hope we
get
see
in
you
touch
all.
with us if you have any questions, it's a lot to take in. Thank you. Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much. Thank you,
for
Sherry.
having me.
Have a good day, everyone.
You know what? I'm going to stop the recording, but I just want to share that